Just waiting for it to sync up. Okay, looks like we are live. I'm just waiting for somebody to confirm for it to sync up. Yeah, sounds good. Okay, all right, let's crack on. Hello, everyone. I'm Brian Waters from the QTube, and we are a platform for composers, and we provide a library of films fully licensed for practice, for education, and putting together a show reel. You can share your work on social media and so on. And each month we release a new film, and we accompany that with the opportunity to get feedback for free. We do a masterclass related to the topic, which we think might be linked in some way to what you might want to do for the film, although you can do whatever you like. And we also, we have a live feedback session every month. So this session this evening, I'm joined by our two esteemed experts, so I will be silent and learning like everybody else. And today's topic is related to what we think might be suitable style of music for the current film in the library, or the currently new film in the library, which is Elephant's Dream, another animation from Blender Studios. It's quite a long film, this one. It's the first time that we've put a long film out completely free for members, and the idea is that you can submit up to 3 minutes for feedback, so bear that in mind, and the closing date for that is the 1st of November. And next week we'll have a feedback session for last month's film, Coffee Run. So without further ado, Brian and Stefan, I'll let you introduce yourselves and crack on with the presentation.
Sure. My name's Brian, and I work at Leeds Conservatoire, where I teach on the film music degree, which I also wrote, and I'm the deputy head of the school in which film music sits.
I'm Stefan Gordon. I'm a principal lecturer at Leeds Conservatoire, and I work on the film music pathway with Brian, and I teach film studies, directing, screenwriting, and also do a little bit on production as well.
Right, are you ready to crack on then?
I'll
share my screen, and then let's get going. Okay, so hopefully you can see all that. If at any point you can't see what I'm doing or hear what I'm saying or hear the music or anything's too loud or whatever, just let Brian know. We're never going to get through all these films. As usual, me and Stefan have bitten off more than we can chew, but we are going to hopefully get through 3 or 4 at least. And the one we're going to start with, and obviously like Brian said, it's dreams, abstraction, dreams and surrealism, which are incredibly weird and broad areas of study. So it's quite difficult to sling it into a now, but basically we're going to try and do some usual thing, some tropes and some ideas about what you might do. So abstract, weird, strange but subtle music isn't always necessarily music that sounds weird or strange. What is weird or strange is the context in which it's used. So you could be using perfectly ordinary music, but the context in which you use it is the bit that's abstract and weird. So don't always think that you have to accompany a weird, abstract, dreamlike sequence with music which is exactly the same. Sometimes it's the whole idea of context that works. So either something strange, out of context, unexpected, or something which is in the foreground. Music for film is generally in the background. This is underscore music. But this kind of music in people like David Lynch's films and people like that we're going to talk about is often in the foreground. So it's a different way in which music is used. And again, bear that in mind when you do it. So it's often the style. It's not the style, but it's the usage, the context. So for most people, I've said this quite a few times, for most people, music is experienced by most people in the abstract, by which I mean people don't hear chords. They can't name the chords. But despite that, people do understand harmony, that I've said there. Unconscious musical analysis is something that we all do. It's part of listening to music. It's part of pleasure. It's part of the pleasure of music. Most people are exposed to quite an ordinary diet of harmony usually. Abstraction, the music in abstraction situations usually demands more attention. So that's what we're going to get to. First one we're going to look at is a film called Deep Water by a guy that me and Stefan both know, a guy called Harry Escott, who comes up to the Conservatoire quite often. And we're going to look, I'll play you some music first, okay? And it's this little bit here. I'm just going to play the audio, a few bars. Okay, and then we will, again, let me know if this is too loud or not loud enough. And I will drag it on a little bit. So some sound effects style stuff, and then we're going to hit this first chord here. Here we go. Okay, I'm just going to stop there, right? I'm just going to go through this a little bit. And again, it's not particularly weird sounding music, but in context with the scenery, it is actually quite weird. If we look at some things that are going on, I've got these divided into things like tensions, warmth, and contrary motion. If I just play this, again, hopefully you can hear that. If I play the first chord, which is a D over an F sharp, okay, and on that second bar, goes to that chord, which is an F sharp with a sus4, right? And it's that sounds a little bit odd. It's not like a complete chord, it's got a suspension in there. The next bar, this one here, starts off with an F sharp minor, then he adds this D, and again you can hear a clash there. The clash you can hear with the blue arrows is those two notes. Together, you've basically got almost of a disagreement in the music about what chord it wants to be. When people hear those kind of chords, they are less able to place them in their minds than they are with normal music. With normal music, people listen to chords and they go, yeah, I understand what that is. This one is just a little bit weird. So is the bar after. Okay, this one here. Okay. So you have this little thing at the top between the B and the C sharp. And I'll then go right to the last chord, which is a perfectly nice D chord, but built over its major seventh. So you've got this chord here. And what this generally paints a picture of is kind of, you know, kind of morose, kind of dark sadness, etc. Let me just play the video now, just quickly, so you can see the way that it's used. Let me just zap it forward a little bit. Right, here we go. Before we start, I should have told you what the film was about, actually. It's about a guy called Donald Crowhurst, who some of you might know him, I mean, might remember him. He's the guy that basically entered a round the world yacht race in the late 60s, and he basically faked it. He basically didn't go around the world. He basically pulled over in South America and waited for the rest of the guys to go around the world, and then he joined the back of them, and he basically cheated. And then it all got on top of him, and unfortunately he basically topped himself and chucked himself in the water. It's an extremely sad film, and I would urge anybody to watch this documentary. It's beautiful. But anyway, let's just listen to this little clip here.
we have dreams. This voyage has dawns. For him, it was the adventure. There may have been an element he wanted fame and glory.
Now, I want to stop that because we haven't obviously got all day, but that's why I've put the text in here. When I spoke to Harry, I first got in touch with Harry, the composer, about this particular film. And when he was scoring it out, he had the dialogue on top of the staves like I've done here. So you can see there, he hesitates there, and then this narrator goes, we're all human beings, we all have dreams, etc., etc. The film, or the documentary, is basically a collection of memories and dreams and recollections. So this is ideal for this kind of music, which does have that kind of dreamy kind of thing going on. Okay, let's move on now. I'll go to this one, and then I'm going to invite Steph to say a few things after Twin Peaks. This is Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, famous David Lynch prequel to Twin Peaks, I think. And what we're looking at here, again, is tension and weirdness. And the three things we're going to be concentrating on is the move from major chords to minor chords, or minor to major. I don't mean relative minor. I mean when you go from a C chord to a C minor chord and stuff like that. Okay. Also, we're going to be looking at things like sharp fives, something like why they're using that particular chord, and also the use of pivot chords. There's certain things we call pivot chords, which are chords that you use on the way to another chord. From one chord to another chord, you'll find a pivot chord in the middle. Okay, it's very weird if you start on a pivot chord. If you start on one of these chords that's meant to be a chord that is in the middle of a piece, in the middle of a sequence, then it's often strange if you start on that. So again, it's not the chord itself, it's the how you're using it. The third thing we're looking at is the minor second interval between the minor third and the major second. So again, I'll play you the music first, and then I'll just explain it afterwards. So I'm going to listen to, I think, one page. Just listen to one page for now. Okay, let me just get to the film. Okay, here we go. Just that one. I'm just going to stop it there and just explain what Angelo Badalamenti is doing there to try and create this kind of dreamlike David Lynch typical vibe. First of all, it's that thing where you're going from a C chord to a C minor chord. Okay, that is relatively rare actually in music, to go to from the same chord but a minor version of it. Okay, the second thing is that his piece is beginning on a sharp 5. So it's this chord here. Now normally you would do that on the way to somewhere else, so you might go. So that sharp 5 is never the kind of chord that you would ever really start a piece on, because it doesn't, you know, you kind of lose your bearings. So he starts on that one. In the second one, he goes to the minor chord. That brings me to the second point, is that little cluster there between, not a cluster, the dissonance there between that D and the E flat. And I'll fill the rest of the chord in now. So remember, he's got the C to the C minor, which is a bit weird to start with. He's then got it starting on a sharp 5. And it's going to another chord, the C minor, and you're adding that add 2 in the bottom there with the green arrow pointing to it. And he basically repeats that cycle round and round and round again, which is a typical Angelo Badalamenti thing. He did that on the original Twin Peaks. He's very into that thing, and that can cause a dreamlike abstraction in music. Simply the repetition of a phrase going on and on and on and on and on. It becomes kind of meandering, but it can be really effective in that scenario. Okay, I'll just play just very briefly the intro to the film so you can see it in action, as it were. Let me take it there. There we go. Right. In the film itself, they use an abbreviated, edited version of it. But those first few chords, really typical Angelo Badalamenti, and typically got this dreamlike vibe going on. Now, it's very easy to say that this is just about textures. And that's what most of the books on film music will tell you. They'll say Angelo Badalamenti, yeah, great synths, great sounds, texture, blah, blah, blah. It's actually only partially about texture. What it's really about is harmony. At the end of the day, everything comes back to harmony. It's that combination. It's the fact that he starts on a weird chord. He starts on the sharpened fifth, and then he goes to this other one here, which is the minor chord with this really dark and deep dissonance between those two. So it's never just about textures. It is about the harmony you use with them. He then brings a muted trumpet in, which is so effective and gives it that kind of jazz vibe that Twin Peaks has. So what I'm going to do now, before we go on to Man of Steel, I'm going to invite Stefan to come in. I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to invite Stefan to join that, and then we'll go on to Man of Steel after that.
Yeah, okay. Right. So just I'll pick up on a few points that Brian made actually that absolutely connect to, well, first of all, the deep water clip. And I think that kind of line of dialogue with "we are all human beings and we all have dreams." I mean, that sort of pins down what surrealism is. So I was going to look at a little bit of the history of surrealism. But also perhaps sort of move it on slightly as well, because obviously the thing is, it is about dreams and it's about the subconscious, and actually it's not that sort of disconnected from where we were last time when we were talking about subtext. Actually, particularly in film, it's about very much about looking underneath the kind of layers, which is where we were last time. And I think I finished off talking about David Lynch, and we're back to him, and obviously he's and I've got another clip as well if we get to it, of it from Lost Highway. And it's because David Lynch is one of the key figures, although he would never have said or admitted that he was a kind of surrealist in any way, but he was obviously clearly influenced by it. But to look at its kind of its origins and what makes it tick is that idea of symbolic dream imagery, so symbolism massively. It's the idea of the truth and all that kind of stuff. And Brian mentioned it in his presentation just there about the unconscious, but the unconscious to capture the emotions. So basically, and this is where music comes, is to connect to the inner self. And so the idea is that for the audience to get that idea of what it's not that the external isn't of that much interest, it's what's going on inside the mind of the character, and that's where I think surrealism can obviously come in. So surrealism takes many different forms as well, and I think that's something else to think of. So it's got its origins and it's become a style almost, but I think it's moved on in some ways, like the whole thing about genre, we've now got cross genres, and we've got directors who want to break down the kind of formula of genre. But even with surrealism, there's that yes, it's dreamlike, but sometimes it's more than that as well, and it can take different forms, which is some of the clips that I'd like to show. So let me first of all, if I just get my talk a little bit about the history of it, and then we'll kind of move forward. So, okay. You see that? Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So it's right, yeah. So this is where I was last time. This is where I finished off, and I think very much this idea of the surface and what lies beneath connects massively to surrealism when I was talking about Blue Velvet last time. So it's got a huge history, and it's a big subject. Actually, there's no way we can sort of cover it in an hour, let alone talking about music, surrealism and music all in one. But it's got its origins with the kind of surrealist movement. I mean, it's very related to paintings, but also poetry. And so Andre Breton had a sort of surrealist manifesto based on Freud's psychoanalysis and the dreams of the unconscious. So the idea that your dream state is kind of in your subconscious is the kind of the real you, if you like. The other important thing is that I think in terms of surrealism is that it doesn't actually reject realism or reality. It just has an idea of looking at it in a different way. Whereas obviously realism as a kind of idea and as a film, it reframes realism. Whereas surrealism also captures some realistic elements, but just has a kind of different viewpoint of it. So then you've got Salvador Dali paintings, and this is a kind of example of it actually, where he would have abstract images, the melting clocks and all that kind of stuff, but the backdrop is it, it is a reality. So there's not like expressionists where it's a kind of completely distorted or we distort reality. There are some realistic and realist elements in there, and I think that's a key part of what the surrealist movement, the origins of the surrealist movement was about, and I think that's what David Lynch also picks up when he was talking about Blue Velvet. You've got suburbia, and then it's like what's going on underneath it. And obviously it's got a huge sort of significance in painting, but once it moved into film, I think it found a real home actually, because it was the idea of exploring a different kind of reality. And so again, it's exploring this is where sort of character study comes in. It's like what's beneath the surface, and this sort of painting, this sort of Dorothea Tanning painting, A Little Night Music, is hugely famous and represents surrealism. I always, when I see this image, I always think of things like The Shining as well, actually. But it's if you, I'm kind of no art expert, but I think you start reading the images, it's this sort of, it's a coming of age narrative, and there's lots of different ways and sort of symbolism that you can look at and read it. And I think like the use of the sunflower again is used in a surrealist context, but it's also a reality. It's something real. Now it sort of made its mark with the Salvador Dali and Louis Buñuel film in 1929 in Chenin de Lou, which is hugely significant in film history. And it was them sort of really pushing the boundaries, and obviously sort of Dali was hugely influenced, and he's got the famous slicing of the eyeballs scene, which is symbolic in terms of the idea of actually don't trust what you see, it's what you feel. So it's like the inner reality, and that's again what's the kind of the idea behind realism. Now the other thing what they did, and I think which is a big part of what David Lynch does actually, was this. Well, it says in this quotation, in less than a week we had a script. Our only rule was very simply no idea image that lends itself to rational explanation of any kind would be accepted. They would do what they would call the automatic writing process. So it was the first thing that came into their head, they would write, and that's what they would kind of stick to. So things like waking up from dreams and writing it down, and that was what would make it into the film. And so they would it's like maybe cross boundaries with this kind of thing, obviously, but it was it was taking the surrealist kind of idea about automatic writing. And Andre Breton, who I mentioned before about his manifesto, they used to sort of get together and do this automatic writing stuff, and like they would sort of cite poetry and that kind of thing, and then they took all these ideas and put it into films. And I think in film it had it really obviously took off because then they could use visual symbols and metaphors, etc. So I'm going to just show you a clip from The Lobster. So this has moved forward. The Lobster in 2015, Yorgos Lanthimos film, and it's surrealist, but not in the traditional sense. So it doesn't have this kind of like weird dreamlike imagery, but yet also it kind of does in its own way. And what you're sort of drawn to is the kind of the you feel really unsettled when you watch it, and part of it actually is the performance. I mean, there's no music in this sequence, but and this is again, I think a good point for composers is to think, well, you know, I don't to make it weird or make it surreal. I don't necessarily have to just add music because it might already be embedded in the image. So let me just show you this sequence. And rather than me explain it, I can just because it's sort of it explains it in the clip itself. What's at the heart of this movie? Right. Let me just get that. You see that? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Hang on 1 second. You can't see it now. Hang on 1 second.
You can see a black screen. Can see a black screen.
Right. That, can you see that? Can you see that? Yeah. Okay. And you hear it? Okay.
Yep.
Hello. I'm the hotel manager, and this gentleman is my partner. We'd like to welcome you. You're one of the lucky ones. You have one of our superior rooms, which means you have a view. Did you read the leaflet?
Yes, I did.
Very good. Now, the fact that you'll turn into an animal if you fail to fall in love with someone during your stay here is not something that should upset you or get you down. Just think, as an animal, you'll have a second chance to find a companion. But even then, you must be careful. You need to choose a companion that is a similar type of animal to you. A wolf and a penguin could never live together, nor could a camel and a hippopotamus. That would be absurd. Think about it. I understand this discussion is a little unpleasant for you, but it is my duty to prepare you psychologically for all possible outcomes. Now, have you thought of what animal you'd like to be if you end up alone?
Yes, a lobster.
Why a lobster?
Because lobsters live for over 100 years. Are blue-blooded, like aristocrats. And stay fertile all their lives. I also like the sea. Very much. I water ski and swim quite well since I was a teenager.
I must congratulate you. The first thing most people think of is a dog, which is why the world is full of dogs. Very few people choose an unusual animal, which is why they are endangered. A lobster is an excellent choice.
Right. So, I mean, it's really, really out there, this film. And it's so the idea that they go to this hotel to find a partner. If they don't find a partner in 45 days, they turn into an animal. And I mean, straight away, that first shot, you know, his head's cut off. I mean, that's kind of a big no-no. And you know, for obvious reasons. And then it's just the really flat acting. So this is what I'm saying. Surrealism can take many forms. So whilst it's, I mean, this could be a dream actually, because it's just kind of so odd. And then not only that, I mean, if you look at this, the way it moves from there and then it jumps across to the other side, that's completely, in terms of breaking the 180-degree rule. So you already subconsciously feel quite awkward. But basically, the flat acting and the kind of bizarreness of the concept of the film takes you into somewhere else. So it you know, surrealism, you know, has become in many ways a kind of different than just the kind of straightforward dream kind of idea. But let me just go back to my PowerPoint. I'll talk a little bit more about that film. Right, there we go. Okay, so this some text on here. Right. Okay. So, it's a dystopian society. Single people sent to a hotel and must find a romantic partner in 45 days or turn into an animal of their choice. So it presents an absurd concept, turning people into animals, which is so the surrealism is it takes a hypological system and applies it to a deeply irrational emotional love there's contradiction, treating love like a cold science. It's surreal in the Bretonesque sense. So the other thing about surrealism is that the artists, kind of the original surrealist movement, they had a real sense of humor. So they were, they liked to sort of poke fun, and it was, I mean, they were actually quite into sort of both Charlie Chaplin and Buster Keaton. So they were wasn't just like let's be weird just for the sake of it. They were kind of having quite a bit of fun with this as well, and they were also very much into the idea of emotion, and particularly in this case, relationships and that kind of thing. So they were exploring many different aspects of this. So it could be robotic dialogue and flat acting, which it was in that sequence, dark comedy through bizarre logic, as well, as I said. So they are actually trying to put comedy into it, but putting a sort of different slant on it. And then really sterile environments and clinical cinematography. People often think of surrealist as being dream, which it is in a lot of examples, including sort of David Lynch ones, but it takes different forms. So I think, again, it's like when we talk about genre, it's kind of such a broad, it can be a really broad term. And I think surrealism absolutely takes a really broad term. And actually, documentary. There's some of the early documentary filmmakers were using surrealist concepts to put forward sort of factual ideas. So yeah, and again, sort of just focusing on what is modern surrealism and using some of Andre Breton's original manifesto, but taking it that bit further. So I can hand back to Brian to talk about Man of Steel if you want, and and if we've got time, I'm happy to look at Lost Highway as well.
Cool.
If that's all right, Brian. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. I will share. Okay, so we're now going to go to something which on surface level appears a lot more ordinary than what Steph's been just talking about, a lot more grounded. But in actual fact, the whole approach musically on this was straight out of the book on basically dreams and surrealism and stuff like that. So the movie Man of Steel, going to look at that. Okay. Audiences spoke of being overcome and overwhelmed by the music in the opening sequence. Music was done by Hans Zimmer, and he made this famous comment when he talked about this. He said him and the director were talking about what kind of sonic world am I going to pour into this? Am I going to pour this melody into? And that kind of takes us slightly there. We've also got this conversation here between Zack Snyder, the director, who said music is like a magical thing. You can't put your finger on it. If you could, it wouldn't be magical. I've kind of featured that because really that's not that's kind of the exact opposite of how film composers need to think. That might be how Zack Snyder thinks, but how composers think is it's not magical. Okay, if it was magical, then it would never happen. You can't put your finger on it, but obviously as a composer you have to have this bag full of ideas in your head and harmonies and textural ideas in order to create this. So it's great that people think of it in that way, but it's really dangerous, I think, for composers to go down that road. So we're going to look at this. We're going to listen to music first. If we had longer, I'd be asking you all these questions. I think, what did the music do that words and images can't do alone? We can talk about that. Does it bring the film closer to you? And we're going to listen to textures, orchestration, harmony, and production. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to play the music before I play the actual film. And I'll just play it first and just make of it what you will. And then we'll discuss this. Let me just find the track. Okay, so we're going to look at this first little clip, the first little bit of music, and we're straight in there. There we get that bass and timp entry. I'm going to stop it right there because we're not going to have time to do the rest of it if I carry on with this particular audio clip. But if you look at that and just look at the chords that are going on, I'm just going to play that chord right at the beginning, right? It's bass clef, don't forget. So if you go from the top, okay, straight dreamy little chord there, straight out of the book of abstraction and dreamlike music. That carries on all the way through it, and the context of the chord changes because of the bass note. So for example, if I play that chord again, okay, if I put an A at the bottom, you're hearing that as a kind of an A minor. If I put the same chord, but I put an F at the bottom, and that same bunch of notes is now communicating kind of as an F major 7, but it's the same notes that are basically all sandwiched together. It's basically a cluster chord. So I'll play the video in a minute, but if we have a look at that chord, I'm just going to concentrate on that chord for now. This chord is several chords put together, okay? So let's look at the first one. You will find an F major 7 if you look at that chord. If you look at the right hand notes, you'll find an F major 7. If you then look at the blue, look at the notes to the side of it, you'll find a G chord. Okay. And if you look at a certain bunch, if you cherry pick that chord, you would then find a C chord. And if you cherry pick again, you'll find an A minor chord. Put simply, you've got the F major 7 added to the G, added to the C, added to the A minor, and that is your quintessential Man of Steel chord, basically. And what they're doing there is they're just confounding people's expectations, right? They're just blinding them with harmonies to the point where it almost becomes unlistenable, but it never gets chromatic and difficult. So it's just basically, it stays within all the white notes. There's no kind of sharps or flats in there. But what you are hearing is all these chords put together. And that's what disorientates the public. Cluster chords always work to disorientate the listening public. And you just get all these chords gelled into one. And that's how Hans did that. Now I'm going to play the intro to the film just so you can see it in action. Okay, let me just play this. Here we go. Sure, yeah, yep. And the melody comes in when we start to see some pictures. Now what Hans is doing at that point is he's basically got full-on C chords. If you look there, in this when this melody comes in, he's got a C chord in the middle stave, but he's still playing that chord that's basically 4 chords into one, and it's that's basically giving these images this real dreamlike sense. And of course, given that this is a flashback, or I mean of sorts, and the whole beginning of the movie is basically very kind of like trance-like, and it's meant to get you into that kind of state of mind. This is a great way to score it. So again, you know, cluster chords made up of 3 different chords, very well put together, and suddenly you're in that completely different zone, you know. So let me move on, and then I'll bring Steph in when I've finished this one. Shape of Water, okay, obviously Alexandre Desplat. It's obviously a Del Toro film, who also directed Pan's Labyrinth. This one is set in Cold War America. The director himself referred to it as a fairy tale. It's full of characters who are different and also lonely. Eliza, this woman here, is an orphan and also mute. She can hear but she cannot speak, and communicates via sign language. She lives in a strange but charming apartment. Now if we had more time, we could, you know, do lots on this film, but given where we are just time wise, if we come to the intro music again, we're going to look at the intro music, and before I play the intro music, I'm going to go back to another film that the same composer scored. Alexandre Desplat scored this movie called The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, rather, not Benjamin Britten. And let me just play this track to you. Okay, Shape of Water, there we go. So I'll play this little thing here. Now I played that because it's very similar to the one I'm going to play from The Shape of Water. Now if we actually have a look at that, I'm just going to go on to the piano for a second. Hopefully this won't be too loud. Okay, so I'm going to play that one to you. Okay. This is a bass clef, don't forget. In that second bar, what I've done, which is a bit weird, basically there's a G sharp and there's an A flat. It's the same note, but it's a different way of hearing it. It's basically an enharmonic version of it. Same with that, that's a D sharp and that's an E flat. Same sound, but different notes. Now the reason I've done that is that if you were playing this music here, let's just play that bar again. It's very easy to think of that as just being an E major 7. If we actually look at this version of the same bar, I do realise this is a bit out there, but it goes to the centre of how music communicates in this way. This time, the same notes I've basically described as an A flat over an E. And I'm simply going to play those chords. Or if I went back to the strings, Desplat's way of getting into this real dreamlike state by essentially using polyharmony. You've got an A flat chord. Okay, let's play it again. Underneath there is an E. Okay, because some of those notes in the A flat chord are actually perfectly happy being brought into the universe of the E chord, but it's because you've got that split personality almost of the harmony that creates that. Now, what I'm going to do quickly is to play the opening music to the other film, The Shape of Water. Okay. I'm going to stop it just there, and then I'll play the whole track to you. This one here, if I just go back to the piano for a second, you've got this thing on the harp. Obviously I haven't got a harp here, but I'm going to play it on the piano. Those first two bars. There's two ways of actually listening to that chord and feeling that chord and absorbing it emotionally. One of them is in context of simply a continuation of B flat. So the other way of listening to it is as a D chord with a sharp 5. So let's just play that chord. That's just a D chord now, and I'm now going to go and stick a B flat at the bottom, like I did on the Man of Steel thing. It's exactly the same deal that's going on here with the Man of Steel. It's this bringing together of different harmonies that just creates this weirdness. And cognitively, if you like, when people are listening to this, they don't know where the center of gravity is, and that's what creates this dreamlike kind of thing with the music. So I'll just quickly play the track before I hand back to Stefan. So the first two bars, and then we're going to come to this bit here, and we're there. Now again, if you read the very few books that are out there on film music and you read about this one, I can almost guarantee it would talk about textures, because people don't really write about harmony because not many people understand it. So when you're reading about this, it's much more comforting to just focus on the textures. But what really makes this thing kick and what makes it really communicate is this fusion between the D chord and the B flat chord. It's those two that don't really go together at all. A chord of D over a chord of B flat. But exactly the same thing is going on there as Man of Steel. You would never kind of go there. If you were thinking about this music, you would never sort of see a connection between Man of Steel and this thing. You know, they're miles apart, but they're not. Musically, it's exactly the same approach. It's this fusion of different harmonies, and that takes you straight into this dreamlike state. And it's not entirely dissimilar from the Benjamin Button intro as well, where he does the same thing, where he's got the E chord and the A flat. So again, that is a very, very cool chord. It's also, this kind of writing, particularly on this one and this one, is quite fairy tale orientated, which is good, because I've got Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian did a little piece on this, and he said it's a Beauty and the Beast fable where both get to be beautiful and neither has to be beastly. And if you look at that quote, and Desplat's score really does occupy the territory that exists between fairy tale and science fiction. A large part of the reason why a film critic like Peter Bradshaw would choose to contextualize this as a fairy tale is actually down to Alexandre Desplat's music. It's also a lot of the other things, but the music is one of the key drivers of that. Right, I'll hand over to you, Stefan.
Yeah. Okay. Well, a couple of things. Actually, when you're just looking at the music you did then, a whistle and a theremin together.
I know.
That's brilliant.
Yeah,
I had no idea. That was really, really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. The bit of research I did on Shape of Water, same thing. It says that, you know, the fairy tale thing came up. Says it's not necessarily surrealist in this strict sort of classical sense. This is how I was saying before, that surrealism has moved on from the kind of Dali stuff of like that automatic writing and all that kind of subconscious stuff, but it and ultimately because it's kind of the love story behind it though, as well as like that. So I think there's a big thing with it for surrealists about the emotion of love is massive. But it's sort of it does draw from surrealist traditions and it elevates the subconscious, but and uses metaphors and all that, but it's definitely got that kind of surrealist thing of with combining it with a dark fairy tale, which I think again, you know, is very much combining the two elements. Okay, well, I was gonna, on the same point really, talking about the subconscious, just to look at if I have a quick look at where was I? Yeah, Lost Highway with everyone. So with Lost Highway, it's I mean, it's kind of really, it's definitely an out there film. Let me just make that full screen, see it better. I don't know if people are familiar with Lost Highway, but it's okay. So 1997, and it was the film before he did Mulholland Drive. It was quite controversial at the time for various reasons, but it's this idea of this main character Fred, and it's just his sort of deep subconscious and his guilt and the big thing about his guilt was obviously he's accused of murdering his wife, and in that classic Lynch style, the film changes partway through. It becomes a different film, and the main character Fred turns into someone else. But what you have is this idea of the subconscious, where and the uncanny. So you meet this character called the Mystery Man. I'll show you the scene in a sec. And it's like this is the same thing about we have a reality, and then David Lynch sort of removes the reality and then focuses on these Fred characters' subconscious. So this is his deep subconscious, and it's like his fear, his guilt, and it's his anxiety, all that kind of stuff. And then I mean, there is a real, I mean, it's not necessarily music, but there's this kind of there's sounds to it where you're completely removed. And this is, so the idea of surrealism, and Brian pointed out what the music does as well, and quite often when using surrealist techniques, is bringing you closer to the character. So irrational dialogue that disrupts reality, uncanny atmosphere, breakdown of rational identity, and an ambiguous use of technology. In this case, it's a mobile phone. So let me show you the clip, and then no, we haven't got long left, but be definitely with, you know. Okay, here we go. So I'm going to just make it full screen. So right, okay, let's do that. Right, hopefully you can all see and hear that, yeah? Right, okay, so it starts, he's in a, I'll do this, so, well, as I'm along, but he's gone, this is the Fred character, and he's gone to a party, normal sounds, etc. And then all of a sudden, he spots his character. sounds removed.
We've met before, haven't we?
I don't think so. Where was it you think we met?
At your house, don't you remember?
No, I don't. Are you sure?
Of course. As a matter of fact, I'm there right now.
What do you mean you're where right now?
At your house.
That's fucking crazy, man.
Call me. Dial your number. Go ahead. I told you I was here.
How'd you do that?
Yeah, I'm mindful of time. So, and then as it gets to the end of it, it does go back to, and obviously the distorted sound increases. Then we go back to the party sequence. That is definitely sort of classic surrealism. So, and in his like press materials, I think for the David Lynch, I think I have the notes somewhere. It says about the man who lives at the end of the highway. The whole film was based around that sequence. That was the thing that he came up with, I think, first for this film, and it's got this high, at the heart of it. Again, thematically, it's about split identity, about his character's guilt and his denial as well of what of the position that he finds himself in, and then he completely transforms into a different character in that sort of classic Lynch way. So surrealism, as I say, it's got its origins, it's got a very rich history, but it's moved into different areas, and I think it can actually sort of cover lots of different genres as well. I think if you think of things like science fiction as well.
Actually, Steph, could I just once you just reminded me of something? Can I just really quickly for 1 minute just share? It's since you mentioned that thing about it and covered lots of genres. The other films in this PowerPoint that obviously we didn't get a chance to do, we had that one. Obviously, we had The Man of Steel, blah blah blah. But also moving on from that, and this is just to prove Steph's point that basically this kind of music and this kind of musical approach doesn't just sit in weird films. There's a film called The Iron Lady, which is about Margaret Thatcher, but what the film is really about, for anybody that's watched it, is not her. It's about the struggle of dementia, and it's about people who grow old and get dementia and they lose it. And Thomas Newman's approach with that, which is why we're going to use it in the PowerPoint, is very dreamlike for a certain bit where she's imagining herself being prime minister and she's really sat there basically in a nightgown, a sad and pathetic figure. Another one we were going to do was The Elephant Man. Again, totally different from what we've been talking about, really. But again, that dreamlike thing fits really well. The other one we're going to do, there's this one here called King Charles III, which is a great TV film made, and the music is incredibly surrealistic because it's basically, he has lots of dream sequences, but it's essentially a fictional reenactment of what happened when Prince Charles died. When the Queen dies, and then Prince Charles takes the throne. It all goes horribly wrong. That's well worth watching. It's got some beautiful dream sequences. I'm just making the point that you find it everywhere. You find it in Edward Scissorhands, which again we were going to do if we had time. a film called The Grey with Liam Neeson, where he has this massive dream sequence at the beginning, and the composer did a brilliant job of actually scoring this. So there's lots of different areas, like Stefan was saying, there's lots of different types of films that basically attract this kind of thing. It's not just the weird stuff.
Yeah, because I was going to also, we haven't got time, but talk about Jonathan Glazer's film, the Sexy Beast, which was a gangster film. I mean, that's what it's kind of pitched as, and he's just, so there's a lot of stuff with that character is so internalized that he starts having these kind of these sort of vivid dreams that he keeps seeing a giant bunny rabbit, and the film just moves into a different direction, but that you'd never expect in a kind of, a gritty gangster film. So absolutely, it fits in so many different areas, and I think this is it. Basically, for me, surrealism is a great storytelling tool, actually. For a director, both just on a kind of surface level, but also thematically, and that subtext stuff that we've talked about before.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Fab. Thank you. I feel like you're waiting for me to say, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I was just waiting.
Just mindful of time.
I was just getting ready for the second hour.
Yeah.
We could go on forever.
It could be pretty surreal. Yeah, no, it was good. Of course it was good. It's always good. It was fantastic, in fact. Thank you, chaps.
I do think it's a good one to choose to do.
Yeah.
I think it was a good call doing this one, because it just is so applicable to so many different genres of film,
Yeah.
What you can learn from this has got so many benefits from almost every film you might want to score. So I think it was a good choice to do this.
And I think that Elephant Dream is a good vehicle for practicing some of this stuff. Yeah, what do you think?
Definitely, yeah.
So I look forward to being transported by the submissions that we receive between now and November the 1st. So join us next week, everybody, for our review, yes, chaps, of Coffee Run submissions. That one. And same time, same place. We look forward to seeing all of you lovely people, and of course receiving your submissions of Elephant's Dream. And have a lovely weekend. I don't really know what to say. I'm kind of waffling, but thanks so much. Thanks so much, chaps. And
thank you.
Bye, everybody.